Welcome to KMET 1490 AM ABC News Radio and the Southern California Business Report with Yvette Walker, a show dedicated to highlighting successful Southern California businesses and the people behind them.
Welcome and thank you for joining Southern California Business Report on ABC News and Talks, KMET 1490 AM, 98.1 FM, and KMET TV. I'm Yvette Walker, live blasting our signal from the center of Southern California, serving a population of over 25 million. Get us crystal clear and on demand by downloading the free live streaming app on Google Play and the Apple App Store. As always, a huge shout out to the team. Mitch, Bill, and Sean, I love you guys, and to our special advisory committee that could be found at www.scbrtalk.com/advisory committee. Click on the link and learn about the remarkable leaders doing the work. All right, everybody, today I have the distinct honor to introduce Dr. David Seigler. He is Behavioral Health Chairman of Arrowhead Regional Medical, who received his Doctor of Medicine degree from the David Geffen School of Medicine at the University of California, Los Angeles in 2011. He completed the UCLA San Fernando Valley Psychiatry residency in 2015, where he also served as the chief resident of inpatient psychiatry. Dr. Seigler joined the ARMC team in 2019 as the vice chair of psychiatry and soon became the interim chair for psychiatry before accepting his current role in April of 2021. As chairman, Dr. Seigler manages the day-to-day operations of his department, oversees the psychiatry residency, and develops new programs that can benefit the hospital and patients. He is also currently an assistant professor at the California University of Science and Medicine, the medical school adjacent to the ARMC campus. Dr. Seigler has published and presented on many psychiatry topics and has won various awards for his academic and professional pursuits. He is an ABPN board certified in psychiatry, is licensed by the Medical Board of California, and is a member of many professional psychiatry organizations. Outside of work, Dr. Seigler enjoys baking, cycling, and restoring cars. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Seigler.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. So, Dr. Seigler, please share your path to becoming the medical director, Vituity chairman, psychiatry of Arrowhead ARMC.
And it is a little bit of a story. As most doctors do, when I graduated from medical school, I had 4 years of residency. And after I got done with residency, and in Los Angeles, I wanted to come back home. I grew up in the IE, and I actually joined Riverside first, and worked there for a few years. I was placed in charge of ETS, which is their psychiatric emergency room. And when that happened, I really sought out a mentor, and I wanted to be the best emergency psychiatrist I could. I had some good experience, but I just wanted that little extra bit, especially if I'm going to be in a leadership position. And so I sought out just by looking through the journal articles, and I found this name over and over and over again, a gentleman by the name of Scott Zeller. And I reached out to him, and he taught me a lot about emergency psychiatry, really taught me how to run a service. And as I worked, I did a few different projects with him on the side with Vituity. We built a small psychiatric emergency room for Providence, a little company in Marion San Pedro. And then I remember I think it was August of 2019 that I got a phone call that said, "Dave, we've got this cool opportunity. It's right in your back door, and we really want you to consider it." And it was Arrowhead. I really didn't know a lot about Arrowhead. It was one of those, it felt like it was siloed at the time. And it simply because I hadn't reached out, I hadn't really looked around. I just kind of jumped into my first job because I was, just graduating. I wanted to be able to, make a living. And when I got there, we were, I was really brought in specifically to fix their psychiatric emergency room. My first day there was 77 patients in their unit they called triage, which is their psych ED. And just using, more modern approaches, we went from 77 patients to 7 in about 4 days.
That is remarkable. I mean, 77 to 7 in 4 days. So I'm sure there's some magic behind how you streamline your patients through the psychiatric department. So, Dr. Seigler, talk about the exposure points in the transfer part of patients between emergency departments and psychiatric departments?
So it's actually a whole can of worms. It's very interesting. There's not a lot of psychiatric emergency rooms in our state. They're blossoming. We're seeing more of them. It's actually a wonderful thing. But just like any other illness, most patients, when they need psychiatric help in an emergent standpoint, they just go to an emergency room. And a lot of the emergency rooms just simply don't have a lot of access to psychiatrists. If they do, it's minimal. And a lot of times that just unfortunately means that they're forced to apply for a hold or keep somebody in the emergency room and not necessarily start the care that they need right away. And that leads to this uncomfortable, vicious cycle where a patient who, is in a setting that's not designed for them, right? Where we've got bells and whistles and we've got, EKGs and codes happening. And in the meantime, you've got somebody in a psychiatric crisis, and all of those stimuli are just brutal for them. They can't focus, they can't heal, it's hard to just calm ourselves down when we're not in a psychiatric crisis. I mean, you always hear the story, nobody wants to see the break room of the emergency department, right? It's very stressful. So, understandably so, like so much of us get stressed out in those environments. If you add a mental health crisis to that, it's only going to make things worse. And then all of a sudden, people can get upset or agitated, and they could be, medicated against their will, which of course is stressful and traumatizing and scary. And so they end up, strapped to a gurney and they get shots in their bottom, and then they wake up 8 hours later and they don't know where they are. They're scared. So what happens when we get scared? It happens all over again. And it's just over and over and over. The psychiatric emergency room approach is so much more helpful because it is an environment specifically designed for this. And so that's one of the things I'm really trying to do in our community is have a spot that patients can be transferred directly to me that's calm. We have people specifically trained to calm agitation, to not over medicate people, to start treatment right away, but to not just give people shots and have them be uncomfortable and suffer.
Right. So give us a snapshot of behavioral health and substance use disorder in San Bernardino County today.
So right now in our county, if you were to think specifically, I'm take things with a grain of salt. What I'm talking about specifically is our safety net Medi-Cal population, just because it is what I know very well. But there's access is just hard. Yes, we have crisis stabilization units. We have 2 in the community that people can go to that are voluntary. They're 24-hour centers, and they're kind of just one step down from my psychiatric emergency room. They are places that don't take holds. They are places that patients need to consent to come to. They can walk out whenever they want. In addition to that, of course, we have our clinics that are throughout the county. Access is more difficult the farther north you get in regards to just staffing of those clinics, and nobody's fault. There's not a lot of physicians up there. And in addition to that, we have some services that are available via a really cool program in Arrowhead's emergency department. This is known as the Bridge program, and the Bridge program is access specifically to a very specific style of medication designed for patients with opiate use disorder. And they get started on that medicine right away, right then and there when they need it the most, and then they get referred to outpatient. And that in that moment, that is like when they're the most vulnerable and kind of the most likely to relapse because they're suffering and they feel bad. But there are some options after they get stabilized. Primarily, we have a gentleman that works in one of the clinics locally in one of the mental health clinics, but we also have my vice chair who works in the public health clinics, and he's available 2 days a week to help those patients, because although that introductory dose gets people out of the woods and gets them more comfortable, every patient is a little different. Every patient will need a different level of medicine, and so it's their jobs to adjust it and try to help target their symptoms a little bit better.
So, can you please share an overview of what services following psychiatric treatment looks like?
It's hard. So after somebody gets admitted to me, it can be a very long time before people get admitted to, or excuse, not admitted. Everybody gets a follow-up appointment, but sometimes the follow-up appointments can be very stretched out. So much so that I actually started around the time of the pandemic because, understandably so, we were grasping at straws. We didn't know what to do at that time. I was asked to give 30-day supplies of medicine, and unfortunately, that's not enough frequently. Sometimes our patients can need 2 or 3 refills before they get in front of a doctor, and it's as an inpatient doctor, kind of the gold standard is 5 days. And so ultimately that is my goal long term, is to try to figure out a way to partner with our other clinics so that we can get it down to 5 days. But right now that's simply not the case. And unfortunately, when that happens, my patients need medicine first, so they get sick again. And we've had some pretty significant wins in the last couple of years in regards to treatment, but that is kind of the limitation right now. And it's not from lack of trying. Everybody's trying. It's just really hard. And psychiatry physicians tend to be in very high demand right now, and so sometimes those hard to staff clinics up in the deserts and what have you, they're just that, because if there's openings in Riverside, Ontario, San Bernardino, they're going to choose that rather than the high desert because it's closer to their homes. And so, yeah, it is limited, and it can be very frustrating.
Absolutely, I can imagine. So, Dr. Seigler, share treatment options for 5150 substance use disorders,
Mhm.
those with substance use disorders, and those with 5150 psychiatric holds.
So there's um, a few different approaches when it comes to mental health and substance use. And there's actually we kind of have 3 different categories. One is primarily substance use, one is primarily mental health, and one is a combination of both. That's called dual diagnosis. And there's actually a whole subspecialty in psychiatry that's dedicated to dual diagnosis disorders. We tend to use the term addictionist, and they are trained to do both. Now, when it comes to dual diagnosis beds, they don't exist in this county. There are none. There are options for substance use. We do have methadone clinics. We do have options like the Inland Valley Recovery Center. We have sober livings. We have different treatment centers like Cedar House and Whiteside Manor that focus on therapy. And don't get me wrong, we do send patients with psychiatric illnesses there. We just need to make sure that they're stable enough to handle, because a lot of that is very heavily therapy based. And so if a patient has an underlying serious mental illness like a schizophrenia, psychotic disorder, they can't really be psychotic and still really engage in treatment and benefit from it. And so we have to really tap down the one side of the dual diagnosis if we can in order to focus on the other one. Now, in regards to psychiatric holds, whether it's substance or otherwise, or just persistent mental illness or just acute mental illness, they come to me. What frequently happens is, depending on who wrote the hold, is where the patient goes. So if you have a patient who's just out in the community and it's written by law enforcement may take them to the local emergency room just because it's the closest spot. And that could be good, could be bad, just in regards to access and individual physicians' knowledge of those those illnesses, because there are a lot of ED docs that are trying really hard to understand mental health and are engaged, but at the same time, they're not going to be as comfortable as I am because I spent 4 years learning it. So yeah, it can be very difficult. But if they are close to us, they come directly to me, directly to my psychiatric emergency room, and it's there that they get seen right away by first an emergency room physician assistant who will medically clear them, make sure that we're not missing anything medical or neurologic. And then they come to my team and we see them within an hour. And once we start treatment, it's actually pretty cool. It's my favorite part of the job because the vast majority of patients that come in, I can get them better enough to go home in under 24 hours. It's about 70%, 80 on a good day. The number that I used to quote all the time was 66, but it's actually higher than that. And many of my patients are feeling better when they wake up the next day. We've already been making phone calls to family. We've been working on those, various ideas of the things that would lead to somebody who could be in an acute crisis, and we've addressed them. And so a lot of times they are able to go home. And if they're not able to go home, they come into my inpatient unit. We have a 70-bed, actually 90-bed inpatient unit, currently 70 because we are converting 20 of those beds to child and adolescent. And we start treatment right away. And it's a combination of therapies. We have a pretty comprehensive set of groups, including from nutrition to pet therapy to coping skills. And we do a little bit of everything. I myself have done a little bit of therapy on the units just because there are times where I miss it. There was something that we're trained in as senior residents, and it is rewarding. It can be exhausting, but it is rewarding. I don't get as much time as I would like to do it anymore. I'm secretly hoping that I can do more with the residents in doing that because at least I get a piece of it,
Absolutely. What are some of the updates you have been able to implement during your time at ARMC in the psychiatric department that has streamlined treatment for your patients?
So I'm going to be a little bit of a braggart here, so forgive me. My first step, of course, was starting our modern psychiatric emergency room approach, starting treatment right away. That changed our throughput significantly. And by doing that, I have more open beds for the patients that do need it, which is wonderful. So much so, actually, that we actually run into a different problem that is really rare in a county hospital, in that I have open beds sometimes. So much so that I'm able to actually work with our transfer center and accept patients from across the county from the emergency rooms where they're lingering and not really getting the treatment that they need. I actually get an email every morning about 9:30 saying, good morning, Dr. Seigler. Do you have any more beds? We've got 3 people waiting. Can you review these cases? And I review every case that comes in, making sure that, of course, they're medically appropriate and what have you. And most days I can at least accept one, if not, I think the best day I've taken about 5 people from other EDs. But, and unfortunately, over the weekend, we haven't had any open beds, but we're pretty productive in regards to that. And of course, when I say 77 open beds, originally the place that I'm thinking of as our Psych ED, it's designed for 16. We had to close down a unit just to house the patients and keep them safe. And so one of my big things that we just broke ground about a month ago was that we were able to get a grant for an adolescent unit, and it's massive. It's one of those things like if psychiatric beds are rare, adolescent beds are hen's teeth. You just can't find them, and they're always full. They're always very, very hard to find beds, and then so it's an even worse problem for the adolescents. And to be honest with you, it's not my specialty. It's not what I'm good at, but it is what I do understand the importance of it. And so the minute that I saw the opportunity, we jumped on it. And of course, it wasn't just me. It was me and the chair of pediatrics and all of the nice people over at Arrowhead that have helped support. And I believe that we will have construction completed in July, mostly because we have to. So we are actively working right now on creating programming and staffing matrices and all that fun stuff so that we're ready to go once construction is complete. And actually, they're working really fast, so much so they took out a big chunk of the parking lot just to have machinery and what have you there. And they're working 7 days a week. So it's definitely the fastest project I've ever seen in the context of a hospital, because of all the regulatory stuff, it just naturally takes a long time. Other big things, I know that we are working on continued expansion of services, stuff I really can't let the cat out of the bag quite yet, but we are, we're not even done with our adolescent project yet, and we're already working on more things. But I got one more that really helps that I'm really proud of, and that's my long-acting injectable project. Long-acting injectables, or LAIs, is what we call them, are they're antipsychotic medications designed specifically for like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, and they're good for anywhere between 2 weeks and 6 months, depending on which one you pick. And we have worked and partnered with some of the companies nearby that manufacture these medications because I'm sure, understandably so, they're expensive. And because of that, we're, this is a limited resource. We can't overuse it. Now, granted, some of these antipsychotics are upwards of $3,000, but that's just a couple days in the hospital. And so if we can keep somebody out of the hospital and healthy and back in the community for 60 to 90 days, we're successful. So we've managed to actually have programs created so that we can have these medications at no cost to our patients. And they are loving it, actually. The way these medicines work, our patients have less side effects, they have less breakthrough symptoms, they like them because they don't have to remember to take a pill every day. And they're staying healthier in the community longer. So much so that our readmission rates, we always measure our 30-day readmission rates. We're 25% below national average, and that includes private hospitals that don't take people that are quite as sick, and maybe have less substance use disorders or what have you. But nowadays, the prevalence is so high that I don't really want to make that statement.
Right. And so, what is the average cost for a patient to stay in your psychiatric department per day? And can you give us, a dumbed down version of how these slow injectables actually work?
Sure. I give this spiel to my patients all the time, so forgive me. I like to do things with my hands for this one.
Mhm.
So actually, first off, the 24-hour code for 24 hours in a crisis stabilization unit is about $2,977 for 24 hours. And of interesting note, if you're billing by a crisis stabilization code, you can only bill for the first 24 hours.
Mm.
So after that, but of course, you treat the patient, you just take care of them. But so it can be very expensive. Now, in regards to the long-acting injectables, this is literally the spiel I give my patients. So, if you take an oral medication, most antipsychotics are twice-a-day dosing. So when you take it orally, you get this spike in your bloodstream. And when you have this spike, that's when you get side effects. And then, of course, your body metabolizes it, right? And it breaks it down. And then you have a low. And when you have that low, that's when the voices come back. That's when people are having residual symptoms that's making them not feel good. And so if you think about it throughout the day, over and over and over again. And so understandably so, it can lead to not as good a day. Whereas if you have medicines that have a slow release, and the technology is actually really cool. They use small dissolvable microspheres of dissolvable suture material. And they have differing wall thicknesses and differing sizes. And they put the medicine in these little spheres, and they inject them usually into your muscle, just like a flu shot, no big deal. And your body breaks it down very slowly. And because of the different thicknesses and sizes, they get broken down at different rates. And so that slowly releases the medicine into your body, which leads to this nice smooth curve rather than the peaks and the valleys that we're talking about. And because of that nice smooth curve, you have less residual symptoms, you have less side effects, and you don't have to remember to take it every day, which is really
Wow.
cool.
That is amazing. The advancement of technology and medicine to really treat patients to this level is absolutely astounding. Um, Please share how the implementation of SB 43 will impact the flow of psychiatric patients.
This is the hard one for me. I really don't know because I don't know what I'm already getting and what I'm not getting. I feel like I see a lot of people with co-occurring substance use disorder in my units right now. In fact, I feel like I see a lot of people with substance use disorder all alone right now. But I don't know what's out there. So I actually don't know what's going to change yet. I'm kind of waiting with bated breath to see.
Absolutely. So in the meantime, do you work with other hospital providers, emergency departments to start, having that conversation about what to expect when SB 43 does go into effect?
It's a topic on every meeting, and we're all doing the, is it going to change? Is it not going to change? Is it going to get better? We don't know. So we are starting the conversations, but I don't have a lot of information on it yet because it hasn't become real. And until it does, I don't think we're going to be able to react accordingly and pivot.
When do healthcare facilities anticipate that it will become real?
I think next year. Well, I could be wrong on that.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. With that said, Dr. Seigler, we're going to head out into a break. Okay, everybody, Yvette Walker with ABC News and Talks, Southern California Business Report, speaking with a distinguished leader in the healthcare field, the medical director of Vituity and chairman of Psychiatry at Arrowhead RMC, with a wealth of experience in mental health and a passion for patient-centered care. He is dedicated his career to advancing psychiatric services and fostering collaborative teams. We are delving into his insights on the evolving landscape of mental health and the importance of compassionate leadership when we return.
The University of La Verne is rated first in California for alumni satisfaction. Learn more about accelerated programs offered online and on campus in La Verne, Irvine, Ontario, Burbank, or College of the Canyons. Visit go.laverne.edu. The University of La Verne. go.laverne.edu.
We are the Empire Strikers, the professional sports team of the Inland Empire. We are a fast-actioned and community-inspired pro indoor soccer team. Our mission is to inspire the Empire. Home games, community events, watch parties, and youth camps are all back. Professional indoor soccer is back. Join us and come watch the greatest show on turf at Toyota Arena or on Twitch. Visit www.theempirestrikers.com for more and any information.
Hi, I'm San Bernardino County Sheriff Shannon Dykes. If you're looking to start an exciting career in law enforcement and make a difference in your community, we are hiring dispatchers, nurses, deputies, laterals, and many more. For a complete list of our jobs and more information, visit sheriffsjobs.com.
Ontario International Airport is on to a better way to fly with over 65 daily non-stop flights to more than 20 major destinations and the easiest airport experience in Southern California. Visit flyonto.com/Ontario to learn more about Ontario International Airport today.
Hi, I'm Dana Rademacher with MGR Property Management.
A lot of people wonder about the value that property management has for their property. Property management can include all property types, including residential, commercial, and HOA. It is valuable because property managers are experienced in what can happen at your property. We're aware of liabilities. We're able to do predictive and preventative maintenance. We know what is coming up with the changes in the weather, the seasons, how old certain aspects or different capital projects at your property are. We're able to best negotiate contract pricing, legalities with your tenants, and anything else that you may need to ensure that you're getting the full value of the property.
If you're interested in speaking with the representative at MGR Property Management regarding your property management needs, you can visit our website at mgrrealestate.com, or you can call our number at area code 909-581-6600 to be connected with the representative.
Cal State San Bernardino is home to the only school of entrepreneurship in California. With globally ranked degree programs, you can start your journey today to become a successful entrepreneur. Learn more and connect at entre.csusb.edu.
Welcome back, everyone. Yvette Walker with ABC News and Talk, Southern California Business Report, here today with a distinguished leader in the healthcare field and the medical director of Vituity and chairman of Psychiatry at Arrowhead RMC, Dr. David Seigler. With a wealth of experience in mental health and a passion for patient-centered care, Dr. Seigler has dedicated his career to advancing psychiatric services and fostering collaborative teams. We're delving into his insights on the evolving landscape of mental health care and the importance of compassionate leadership. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Seigler.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. So prior to the break, we spoke about your time at our ARMC, what you've been able to achieve, and what's coming down the pipeline as it relates to SB 43. Dr. Seigler, please share how accessibility or follow-up care impacts treatment plans for your patients or all psychiatric patients.
It's everywhere. Accessibility is an issue everywhere we go. We can pick your average, middle class person with good insurance, and just getting someone that, number one, getting a psychiatrist that will actually take insurance is really hard nowadays. The vast majority of psychiatrists actually work private practice. They do what's known as a super bill, and a super bill is essentially a small half sheet of paper that says, I've performed these services. They give it to the patient. They charge cash for the hour, and then they ask the patient to go back to their insurance company and try to recoup some of that. And the vast majority don't get very much recouped. It's really hard. And for our county population, actually access is a little better because so many people have Medi-Cal. And so although it could be longer, it could be a little, actually, I wouldn't say that's longer because the insurance process is so hard, but it can be take quite some time to get in with a physician and be started on, restarted on medication or continued on the medication that's been helping them. And so it does derail my treatment plans quite a bit, because I'm kind of hoping that the stars are going to align for my patients and that they're going to be able to get in front of a doctor within 30 days, that they're going to be able to go to their follow-up appointments, because in addition to just getting in front of the provider, many of these patients are, they don't have transportation. So they have to be lucky enough to navigate the bus systems or find a ride to get to their appointment. If they can't, of course, it's just simple. Of course, they're going to miss it. And then when they miss it, the cycle starts all over again. And so it's quite common, actually, that patients who are stable, they're doing okay, they'll walk into the psychiatric emergency room and they'll start by saying, I just left the hospital, I am feeling okay, but I can't get in with my doctor for another 60 days and I just need my medicine. And so much so that even some of the long-acting injectable patients that we talked about earlier, they'll come in and they'll just say, I need my shot. And so, we're happy to do that for them. It's not something that we can bill for or do anything with, but you treat the patient and you try to keep them well, because that's the best thing to do for the community. And that's the spirit of working in a county hospital. I wouldn't want to work anywhere else. And, actually, although it's a, symptom of something that's wrong in the system, it also kind of makes you feel good when they come in, because it shows that what you're doing is working. And it's like, okay, well, I did the right thing and I'm going to continue to do the right thing. And, that's okay. So frequently I will actually sit down with those patients and have a little bit longer conversation than you would think, because it's just like, oh, I just need my shot. Oh, okay, here you go. And let them go. But instead I try really hard to spend, 10 to 15 minutes with them, telling them, like, I'm really happy that you came in. I'm really proud of you that you're getting it, and then you're working hard to better yourself. And I want you to come back and see me. And so they do. And it's no big deal. I think that it would be better for them to have some, an option that they don't have to go to a large psychiatric unit where they were probably involuntary admitted, just because I think it would be for their comfort. But when I do see those patients, it's actually a really rewarding. Briefly, one of my favorite stories. I had this lady, and it wasn't actually here. It was Riverside, another county hospital that I worked in, where she came in and she was loud, but not in an aggressive way. Just, I need to see Dr. Seigler. I don't want to talk to anybody else. Go get him. I need him now. And everybody thought that she was upset or angry or and then I get into the room and she's like, I need you. What did I do? I don't understand. She's like, I was at another place. They stopped my medicine. You gave me the right one, and I'm not sleeping anymore, and I don't want to get admitted again. Oh, okay, happy to do it. And so we just started her medicine. It was no big deal. And after that, she left with a smile on her face. But I love those kind of stories because they really do recharge your batteries, and it shows that you're doing a good thing. You did the right thing. But you get them more often than you would expect because our patients they just lack those resources. They have trouble getting to where they need to be.
Right. So with that said, what is the range of the cognitive state of a standard patient? So, you have those that come in and they know exactly what they need and who they need to talk to, but what does that range look like in terms of the cognitive state of those patients that are coming into your department?
It is all over the place. And I mean that in a good way. Variety is a spice of life, and I love having different presentations so that I can remain energized and engaged. But I have patients that are of higher socioeconomic status who have had horrible arguments, have had the worst day of their life. Maybe their marriage is falling apart, what have you. They've lost their job. They've had some crisis, and suddenly they don't know what else to do. And in reality, at that day, I'm seeing that person on the worst day of their life, but they're completely, cognizant. They're talking to me. They're engaging with me, and actually, those tend to be harder because a lot of times I can't just give somebody an antipsychotic medication and improve their cognition because there's nothing wrong with their cognition. They're having a horrible day, and in reality, their treatment is going to be much longer. Might be outpatient, but it's still going to be much longer. And then I have the full spectrum. The classic presentation for somebody with a persistent and serious mental illness who may be chronically homeless, not have access to resources, maybe not no access to transportation or shelter. A lot of times they display what's known as negative symptoms. And negative symptoms in schizophrenia are very different than positive symptoms. When people think of schizophrenia, they tend to think of hallucinations. They hear people who hear voices, people who may be talking back to those voices, people who may be doing very stereotypical movements, like literally drawing in the air. And then there's negative symptoms, which are quiet. And they're actually the worst. They're the most detrimental to a patient's functioning because it has to do with, functional capacity. Sometimes I have patients that their negative symptoms are so bad, they may have been picked up for being, disrobed in public. But in reality, when you go see the patient, they're trying to be clothed. They can't work the buttons in their shirt. I've had patients that, are just attempting to do what we ask of them. We say, Mr. Smith, will you please go take a shower? And they'll say, sure, whatever you need, doc. But they'll go into the shower with all of their clothing and just stand under the water. And so, although they've attempted to do exactly what we asked them to do, it's actually worse for them and can lead to skin breakdown and all kinds of nasty things. So much so that negative symptoms are actually one of the things that the field is trying so hard to learn how to treat, because it actually is what's leading to the decrease in functioning. Many patients who have auditory hallucinations, once you get them started on some medicine that knocks them down enough that they can focus on other things, they're productive members of society. They can work jobs. They can do just fine. I have all kinds of cute stories of patients when I was in training who finagled interesting ways to give me graduation presents and not violate boundaries by talking to my supervisors and doing things like that. And of course, it was quite funny because that is a thing that psychiatrists, we don't accept gifts. And so it was always like, no, I can't take that from you. It's a violation. No, I talked to your supervisor. This is how we did it, and it's okay. And it was just cute little things like that. But a lot of times those patients do really well, but the patients with the negative symptoms, they're quietly suffering, and they're the ones that really aren't engaging. And they're also the ones who don't appear to be agitated. They're not the ones who are getting shots, but they are the ones who are suffering the most because they can't they can't even get out of bed. So many of them have trouble eating. I had a man the other day who he was trying to be socially appropriate with me, and he had a pudding cup, and at least in the emergency room, we don't usually give out a lot of utensils, so a lot of people end up drinking out of the cup. He was trying to be as socially appropriate as possible while I was interviewing him, and he was taking a straw, like just a simple straw, and trying to use it as a spoon. But we're talking about a very small, narrow, white straw. You can imagine how much he was able to get into his mouth, and it was one of those like, oh, that you're clearly suffering. That's brutal. And it's those ones that I try really hard to focus on the most because they're the quiet ones. You got to give them a chance. You got to dive in with them, because if you can get some functioning for them, they end up much happier, and they are the hardest to pull out of that state, but they are the most rewarding when they do finally get better and go home.
And what is the average length of time of admissions of your psychiatric patients? What is the average stay that they experience in your department?
So I'm an average length of stay. So obviously the emergency room, I already said, like about 80% can go home within a day. But those that actually get admitted, they do stay a little bit longer. Average length of stay in most psychiatric units, mine included, is 4 to 7 days. And in those 4 to 7 days, you'll see a rapid improvement for 80%, 85% of patients. And then there's those few that are very, very ill and end up staying much longer.
And what are your thoughts on conservatorship expansion under policies that are tied to treatment as we see it today?
It's a total can of worms. I'm gonna phrase this as the way I was trained, because I think it's the best way to say it without making enemies. We are a very paternal specialty. I have the ability to hold people against their will, and I feel that it's very important that we have a checks and balances approach to this, and we do. If I decide to keep somebody longer than 72 hours, and we put somebody on what's known as a 5250, there's a hearing that has to happen. And that in that hearing, I argue my opinion, and the patient and an advocate specifically hired for that patient gets to argue for the patient. And a decision is made by the courts, a representative of the courts. And I think that's really important because I've lost to them before. I have come to these hearings and I've had people tell me, I don't want to take this medicine. I don't like it because it either makes me gain weight, it affects my sleep patterns, which are all valid things. I mean, these things happen. And at these hearings, if that were to happen, I don't get upset. That actually shows that although I didn't catch it, that patient is doing better than I thought that they were. And so when it comes to this, comes to conservatorship, I think that we should be treating patients in the least restrictive environment possible. And that does mean that there are some patients who need it, and there are plenty that don't. And I think that it's important that we continue to have those checks and balances in place so that we are not keeping people who shouldn't be there.
Dr. Seigler, what does a proper treatment plan look like? And what happens when a patient doesn't have the resources, either through an infrastructure, a lack of programs, or funds, specifically, either insurance or savings, in order to be treated fully and successfully?
So our treatment plans are multidisciplinary. Coming to rounds is actually really interesting because it's very different than a typical, inpatient internal medicine doctor walking around. The internal medicine team may have a social worker for dispo, and they may have a intern with them, or maybe a medical student. But I tend to have a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, sometimes if I'm really lucky, I get a recreational therapist, a dedicated clinical therapist, myself, an intern, a resident, one or two medical students, and maybe even one or two nursing students, because as you're hearing, this crew is so large that frequently we just sit at a table in a conference room, and the patients are invited in one by one, to, of course, respect their privacy as we talk about our treatment team. And a good multidisciplinary treatment team, which is the gold standard in psychiatry, is about collaboration, because each profession that I've just listed, they're good at different things. Like, yes, as the physician in charge, I am the guy who makes the ultimate decision, but I'd be a bad physician if it was just me and I was being a lone ranger. And so instead, I want to hear, like, oh, the social worker got a call from home, and this is what they look like at home. And the occupational therapist is saying, oh, and I just did this Kells assessment, and I'm comfortable that they're very comfortable riding the bus. Great, that says a lot, because a lot of times, one of the simple, just barometers that we'll ask in this meeting after a patient has come, walked out the door, is, can this person, if given the means, walk into a Wendy's and get food? Can they go somewhere and get a lunch? Because that's like the basics in order for survival. Is you have to be able to go navigate transportation, albeit via walk, car, bus, bicycle, what have you, but they have to be able to arrange transportation, understand how money works, appreciate the importance of that transaction, and then consume that meal and keep themselves safe. And that actually is something that we think about a lot of times when we're describing our patients, because we'll say, he is safe, this person is okay to go, but we may have to make sure that they get a ride to where they're going, because where they're going, they're going to stay for quite some time and continue to get better. Or, sometimes we can do that with a patient, sometimes we can't. And so those are kind of the important things that we really think about. And those treatment teams can be very detailed. In fact, the notes are mile long, which is hard to navigate sometimes, but it is truly important, and it really does take a village to do a good job.
Absolutely. Dr. Seigler, is the current behavioral health infrastructure prepared to take on the challenges of the future? Forget about today, but of the future as well?
Not at the moment, but I do know that it's getting the right attention. The fact that you and I are having this conversation right now makes me hopeful. Yes, we have a lack of resources now, and I do expect there to be different lacks of resources, because much like many other problems in society, it's an onion. You fix a couple things and you find new things, and that's okay. Continued improvement is not necessarily a bad thing, but I think that the narrative is going to change over the next decade as we fix the problems that we know are problems, and then we find new ones. And it doesn't matter what field that we're in. We keep that, just like the long-acting injectable thing is such a great solution. But now we have to figure out how to get them in arms, right? And so part of my training that I do with my residents is I do that spiel that I just gave for you, so that I can teach them, because in the field, injections have a negative connotation. And so when you tell people that you're going to give them a shot, they say no, right? Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm derailing. I'm not trying to. I do think that we're going to continue to find issues, just like we find issues in every other healthcare delivery system. And I think that people are trying really hard, and people are working really hard to have the right conversations with the right people, myself included. And there is a lot of focus on mental health right now, which I think is a great thing, because when I signed up to be a psychiatrist, most doctors didn't want to be one. I thought I was the weirdo, and then I kind of met my people, and we got into it, and then I realized that we're all weirdos, but the good kind. We all have an interesting potpourri of knowledge. We all like to tell stories, and we all have passions for the nuances that come with really learning how to look at a person. Because obviously, most of my stuff that I do when I'm treating somebody is I don't have blood tests. I have very few blood tests. I can't put a stethoscope on their heart and figure it out. And so I have to pick it up by just watching and being mindful. And that is something that I have to say is that most of the people that I talk to, be it nursing leadership, administrators, what have you, when talking about mental health, they become very observant, and which is really cool because they're trying. And so, yeah, we're going to find more stuff, but I think we're always going to find stuff.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Seigler, but quickly, the ABCs, what does an ideal stream or best practice of psychiatric care look like when you consider sustainable efforts for your patients, and what is the best way to connect with you and ARMC?
I mean, well, I'll start with that one, the second part, because it's easy. Come to me. We have an ambulance entrance. You can walk right to the front door. There's a doorbell. You just click it. You say, I need an evaluation. We will invite you right in. The longest wait is usually if we have a few people waiting, especially because of the construction right now. We're a little closed. We've had to cut down on our waiting room a little bit, so people are waiting outside occasionally. But we'll bring you right in 24/7. We'll get you an evaluation. You'll be medically cleared and seen by a psychiatrist. And if you're not having to stay, we hand people packets of resources or drive them directly to where they need to be in order to get the treatment that they need. And so that's easy. Come see me. I'm happy to do it. We're here 24/7. And that's just part of the fun. And, ideally, when somebody does come in and do that, what I would love to see happen in the long run is they leave with their medicine. They get seen by a psychiatrist while they're still somewhat acute. I want them to be seen in under a week. And so it's really helpful for the other psychiatrist, the next guy in the chain, or girl, but the next person in the chain, to see what they look like as they're getting better, so they have a better idea. Because otherwise they're just stuck reading my note, and my note, I try them to make them good, but it's not going to be perfect because, of course, my perspective will be slightly different than any other person due to their own background.
Thank you so much for giving us this insight into the world of psychiatry. I really appreciate it, and so does our audience. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Seigler.
Thank you.
All right, for everybody listening, don't forget to look for us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Check us out on scbrtalk.com. Don't miss my interview and deep dive into the ever-evolving landscape of healthcare in California, highlighting prominent leaders in the industry: George Green, President and CEO of the Hospital Association of Southern California; John Chapman, President and CEO of San Antonio Regional Hospital; and Dr. Kevin Parks, President of Mountain View Physicians Medical Group, who provided invaluable insights and updates on the current state and future trajectory of healthcare in Southern California. Next week, we will have Lisette Escobedo, VP of Government Relations and Civic Engagement at Altamed. Lisette Escobedo currently serves as Associate Vice President of Civic Engagement and Advocacy at Altamed Health Services, where she has led the successful scale-up and implementation of civic engagement campaigns, as well as the successful strategic implementation of Ándale, ¿qué esperas?, an $11 million vaccine outreach and education effort, which led to over 130,000 vaccinations statewide. We will see you all next week. You do not want to miss it.